Good morning, everyone. Happy to see everyone. Welcome to WordCamp Montclair. We do have two talks, one in the main room and one in the classroom on the side. But I'm going to introduce our first speaker, Dan Berko. Dan Berko is a WordPress developer for over 12 years, working for media and publishing companies of various sizes. Before that, he worked in newspaper writing, editing, and producing, and developing tools to improve editorial workflow. His talk is on what if we call it assistive AI instead. Give Dan Berko a warm welcome, everybody.
Good morning. My name is Dan Berko, and I'm a developer at PMC, Penske Media Corporation. We publish a few magazines and websites. I work on the publishing side, supporting our websites, and I've spent most of the past year working on some of our AI initiatives. When ChatGPT caught everyone's attention in November of 2022, the reaction of folks at PMC was no different than everyone else's. We all had the same bright ideas. Let's write some poems and short stories. Let's try to stump the chatbot with trivia. Once we got that silliness out of our collective system, we wanted to see if it could actually improve our efficiency and enhance our final product. We wanted to see if ChatGPT could produce some code to jumpstart a task, for instance, or write some tests for a certain function. Maybe, we thought, it could improve pitch decks in advance of a meeting with some prospective clients. As in the rest of the world, the folks inside PMC had a variety of reactions to this new technology. We had the excited converts who wanted to figure out what this AI could do and how to use it immediately. We also had the doomsayers who saw the sky falling on journalism and media again. And we had a lot of executives who wanted us techies to get on top of it to figure it out. And that it was pretty ephemeral. Most projects we take on are well-defined development projects. Here's the starting point. Here's where you need to be. It should take 2 days, a week, six weeks. Here are your tickets, go. But figuring out AI was, of course, different. It's a research and development project with a less definable end and a murky journey to get there. There's lots of reading and watching and trying to understand and learn. There's ideas and some coding. We knew where we were starting from, but we had no idea where exactly we wanted to go. We had to get used to saying, I don't know. We had to get used to the idea that after a few days, a few weeks worth of work on something, the outcome could be nothing more than a few bits and bytes for the scrap heap. And that had to be okay. That didn't always feel right to those of us used to having a regular measure of our productivity. And it still doesn't feel quite right, if I'm honest. So where do we start? This is probably a good spot for a quote from someone famous. This one's pretty good. By Saturday Night Live's creator, Lorne Michaels. To me, there's no creativity without boundaries. If you're going to write a sonnet, it's 14 lines, so it's solving the problem within the container. In a nutshell, we needed that container, guidelines to help us traverse the landscape. If you don't know what's off limits, or if you don't have an idea of what people want, where do you start? One of the biggest challenges in a media company grappling with a new technology like AI comes right off the bat. Trying to decide what you do and don't want it to do in the absence of knowing quite what it's capable of. Fortunately, a bunch of very smart editors and directors and vice presidents came together and talked about how AI could serve the greater mission of our company and established guidelines for how the company as a whole could use it. I won't go deep into the details, but I wanted to share some of the overarching principles we use to guide the company. And to be sure, plenty of other companies have published their own guidelines. As a developer who started out as a journalist, with all the mission-driven idealism that implies, I think these in particular are pretty important. What will not change is our commitment to transparency and maintaining the highest ethical, legal, and journalistic standards. We require the same high standards of all our editorial content and other products and services, regardless of whether generative AI is used. Consistent with PMC's core principles, original content, no substitutions, the use of AI tools to write or fact-check written editorial content or similar audiovisual content, such as podcasts and interviews, is strictly prohibited. All approved uses of generative AI tools in public-facing contexts or materials should be disclosed to the reader. How do those principles play out? Let me give you a real-time example. I didn't use AI to write my presentation, but I did use it by the way of the tools I'm demonstrating to create some of the images you're seeing. Here are a couple more principles. PMC trade secrets or confidential business information may not be uploaded on any AI system. And do not use tools to make hiring decisions or for performance reviews. Our company's guidelines document also encourage people to experiment with approved generative AI to make employees work easier. All of this adds up to a starting point. I was told it's a rule that you can't have an AI presentation without at least one slide of the Terminator or reference to Skynet. So now we got it out of the way. But seriously, this reference has become kind of a meme for all those who fear that AI is going to use the cliche, take over the world and replace human beings. And speaking of that, I wanted to address this concern head on. We certainly struggled with it inside our company. As I mentioned, there were folks concerned that AI was going to replace writers and other creatives. And as I explained, our policy prohibits the scary generative part of generative AI. But at the same time, that's central to the technology itself. It's an accurate term. Unlike big data models, which tracked and predicted patterns and possibilities, these new AI models actually generate new data, images, and text based on what they were trained on. So how does a creative enterprise that values its talent use Skynet for good? Is that even possible? We think it is. That's because we're using AI within narrow and thoughtful constraints. Consistent with our principles, we're not generating new content in the sense of creating images or writing articles. Instead, we're trying to create tools to help folks with their work. The tools become our assistants. And in that light, we started using the term assistive AI when discussing how we use the technology. To some, it may seem like a difference without a distinction, but we feel it telegraphs what it is we're actually trying to introduce. So what are some of the challenges of making assistive AI work for a big media company like PMC? For context, some information about the company. We have a team of almost 30 engineers across 23 sites that publish 12 million words a month. We have a big internet presence and a lot of sensitive data, and we need to employ AI carefully and with rigor. And this leads to the first conundrum that we faced in trying to incorporate it into our business practices. It goes back to this line in our AI guidance document. PMC trade secrets or confidential business information may not be uploaded on any AI system. At first blush, this seems like a pretty intimidating, pretty limiting rule, and something that runs counter to the instructions to experiment with AI to make employees work easier. How can you get help with a deck or summarize unpublished reporting if you don't give the AI access somehow? Am I allowed to paste code fragments into an AI so it can explain it to me and help write some tests? People in general have lots of concerns about how these models are trained. Perhaps unsurprisingly, there's a lack of trust and a lack of clarity about whether things we put into an AI chat are being used to train the next system or tune the current one. Also unsurprisingly, a number of lawsuits have been filed about copyrighted materials being used inappropriately in training the models and even voicing them. But thankfully, there's a little bit more to that core rule I mentioned, and it gives us a little more freedom. PMC trade secrets or confidential business information may not be uploaded on any AI system except our Chat PMC environment. Chat PMC, that's kind of starting point part two. Those smart editors and visionaries who met and came up with our guidelines foresaw that the only way to safely implement AI would be to create our own. So we created a chat interface using Microsoft Azure AI Studio with a closed instance of ChatGPT that only PMC employees can use. We started with ChatGPT 3.5 and now we're up to GPT-4 Turbo. You also need access to PMC systems in order to sign into it, so it's pretty locked down. Once it launched, people went to town. There were lots of attempts at improving presentations, creating documentation and how-tos and templates, research, creating macros and formulas for Excel. But we wondered, could we make it even easier for editors and writers to use? So we found a plugin from the WordPress agency HumanMade called AI Plugin that did a bunch of AI things. We really like the chat sidebar in that plugin. Given the licensing, we were able to pull the sidebar out, reskin it, and get it chatting with our chat PMC instead of OpenAI's ChatGPT. When editors use the sidebar, we start the chat by sending a brand-specific prompt along with the text of the story and the headlines as part of the initial instructions to the AI. Now the editor can talk about the article right there. They might ask for 3 headlines for a story, or they might ask, are there any additional questions you would ask? Making Chat PMC easier for our editors to use allows them to shift their workloads towards the stuff that's actually generative, that is, the stuff only humans can do. It means they can spend less time on the less stimulating parts of their job, like proofreading, and apply all that time towards more creative pursuits, the parts they love most about their jobs. Making Chat PMC editor-friendly also meant that we've been able to empower them to experiment with it and come up with solutions that we wouldn't have thought of. In other words, it prompted them to think differently about their jobs. For instance, the staff at one of our publications, Deadline, started working on their prompts and were able to turn the sidebar into a helpful style guide and editing tool to do some proofreading and line editing, checking grammar and punctuation. Another publication, Billboard, has a Spanish language version of their site called Billboard Español. It does have original writing, but a lot of the stories and lists are translated from the main site by a team of editors. After some testing, the Billboard Español editors determined that while not perfect, Chat PMC was good enough for a first pass translation. I want to be clear that Chat PMC is just doing the first pass. Each translation still goes through the human editing process, but this streamlining makes a difference. Billboard Español editor Sigel Ratner Arias estimates that the automated translation is saving anywhere from 5 to 20 minutes per story, depending on how complicated the story is. How does this add up? They post around 50 items a day, and well over half of those are translated items. If automated translation saves, by conservative estimate, 5 minutes per piece, our staff at this publication is saving more than 2 hours a day. What does this gain time represent? Maybe it means the editors can translate or write another handful of stories, or they have time to edit one of those complicated pieces to make it really sing. We were able to make it a little more efficient. We improved the workflow a bit by adding a button so they can create a copy of a story with all the assets already assigned. We increased the maximum length of the translation that can be returned by Chat PMC. But for a long time, it still involved a lot of copying and pasting. So we thought, what if instead we had a button that took all the fields we wanted translated at once, body text, title, excerpt, the SEO fields, and sent them to ChatGPT, or Chat PMC, and updated the post with the translation. Well, it turns out Azure has a dedicated translation API. Here you go. Right now, it just does Spanish, but we license sites internationally. What could this mean for productivity and licensing if we added an Italian translation or a Korean translation? Another challenge we've been tackling is SEO. Good SEO requires nuance, and some editors nail it, while others just fill out the fields so they can publish the story. Both editorial and our SEO team had asked for tools to make it easier to produce and improve its quality. So we brainstormed. What if we had a tool that made it easier to come up with SEO titles and descriptions, especially if we could make the sites with lower performing SEO perform better with the same or even less work? We found a company called Noda. They have their own paid SEO plugin. It analyzes the article, spits out a few choices for SEO and slug, and can generate keywords for your story, create a bullet point summary, and it can also create some additional social sharing content. We experimented with Noda and found it didn't quite work right away for us straight out of the box. Why? We have specific needs, and the new plugin wasn't meeting them. We have best practices and guidelines established over the years by our SEO rock stars, and also some of the brands really stick to their editorial voice even in their SEO tagging. This plugin couldn't even match headline case correctly. So we had a meeting with Noda, showed them a short deck comprised of headlines and summaries generated by their tool, and the choices our editors used instead, along with information about why they made the choices they did. The company heard our concerns and offered us a proposal. Pick one brand. Send us so many thousands of posts in their metadata, the top X organic performing, the bottom Y organic performing, the top Z performing per social network, and we'll train a model for you. They were excited to have something challenging to do. So how did this turn out? We don't know yet. We're still in the fine-tuning stage and haven't put it into production yet. But we're excited to have a partner sculpting the technology to our specific needs, and the process has taught us a lot. This turned out to be another lesson in AI adaptation. Sometimes when you have really specific needs, the technology will be clumsy until it gets to know you. Another plugin we looked at is called Classify. It's by 10up, another pretty well-known WordPress agency. Out of the box, it almost did everything we wanted. Title suggestions, check. Auto tagging and categorization, check. Image alt text and caption writing, check. 10up had been working on this for a while, so it had a bunch of different tools built in that really appealed to us, but it wasn't quite right. PMC's general philosophy is to buy a solution when possible instead of building it in-house to benefit from others' expertise and efficiency. So we contracted with 10up to build in a few things that would bring the tools up to where we wanted. For instance, we needed to be able to replace some service providers with the equivalents from our preferred vendor, Azure. Instead of creating default options, we wanted to be able to be offered multiple options and given the opportunity to choose the best one. We weren't asking for anything proprietary, so 10up could release any feature they built with us as part of the plugin, making the plugin more useful for everyone. Remember how I said if you make it easy to try new things, people start thinking differently? After the initial work was completed, 10up came to us with some of their own ideas for new features for the Classify plugin. Right now, they're finalizing a pretty cool Smart 404 page that uses AI and Elasticsearch to anticipate what information you're trying to find if you landed on a non-existent URL. This feature would ideally suggest more accurate choices than what WordPress search alone can provide. And this got us thinking too. In order to use the Smart 404 feature, we need to create embeddings for each post. Embeddings are vectors, numerical representations of each of the words in a post. Similar to how you can use latitude and longitude, which is a vector consisting of two numbers to identify a city, you can use a vector to identify a word, except those vectors can consist of hundreds of numbers. And the vectors will be different depending on context. For instance, the vector for the word Taylor will be different whether you're talking about national treasure Taylor Swift or local delicacy Taylor ham. You can then find two related posts based on how similar the map of vectors is, like how you can tell how close two cities are by comparing the latitude and longitude of each city. This is how I understand it. It's complicated math. So if we can generate these embeddings for all our content for these Smart 404 pages, maybe we can use the same idea to replace or improve our site search. And then what? Maybe we can improve the widgets that suggest similar stories and help keep readers on a site. Perhaps on our e-commerce sites, we could show potential shoppers additional products similar to the one they're currently looking at. Over the past year, we've evaluated more than 100 AI tools, WordPress plugins, chatbot vendors, and coding tools. Some of these evaluations have just been reading documents or watching a vendor demo, and some have been more involved. So what's the takeaway? AI provides new ways of finding information and automating certain editorial tasks in ways that can seem almost like magic. What AI does not provide is a one-size-fits-all solution. You need to figure out what you need and what kind of solution works for you. First, I think you need to figure out what it is you want to gain. Create posts, create images, make it easier for readers to find those posts and images. Do you want it to tag and categorize your posts for you? Identify people in your images? Then how do you measure success? Do you want to save time? How much time? Are you trying to boost interactions with each post? And how much gain makes it worth a significant investment in time in getting the AI tool you're using to where you want it to be? It doesn't have to be expensive. Usually you can use the free tier of Microsoft or OpenAI services to get a sense of whether the AI plugins you're using are good enough to spring for the next level. I recommend starting with what you already know and use. For instance, both Yoast and Jetpack have AI-enabled features. If you use those plugins, maybe give their AI-enabled versions a test drive. If you're comfortable with code, you can really get your hands dirty running some experiments with free models, but you do need a fair amount of disk space because they're not small. But you can run those on your laptops pretty well. And if you don't find what you need today, come back next quarter or in 6 months. This field is evolving constantly. And even if you do find something you like, it might still be worth taking another look in 6 months. And just because I talked about it and it works for us doesn't mean it's right for you. By the same token, something that we ruled out might work perfectly for your needs. It helps to consider the big picture. What's your overall goal, and is there some way in which the technology could help you get there in a way you never could have anticipated? It may mean a total departure from how your company has always done things, and that's not a bad thing. Adapting AI to make it easier for our writers and editors to tell stories is way better than waiting for Skynet to take over the world. That's all I have.
We're going to open up for some questions. So if anyone has questions, you could please come down.
So you guys built your own AI using tools from Microsoft. Mm-hmm. So that's all housed on your own servers. What kind of resources because you had said something?
Well, it's housed on Microsoft servers. It's just a closed instance, so it's I think a few $100 a month to run it, but it's not. I think that includes the server. It's the hosting that it's on. That's just a Flask app.
So it's a SaaS?
Yes.
Hi. All right, so Chat PMC is, I don't really understand. It's like a separate language model, but it's infused with information from, from PMC's publications, right? So it'll have all the information that's in Rolling Stone and Billboard that other language models would not have access to, right?
Not yet.
But that's the goal.
That's the goal, ultimately. It's a sort of a vanilla Chat GPT instance that Microsoft offers, and ultimately we want to train it on our content and use it for fun stuff. Mm-hmm.
So mind blown, great presentation. I tweeted out that more people in WordPress need to learn with this because AI is where it's at. I work in sales. Almost every conversation starts with, so what are you doing with AI? It's not going away. How did you within Penske Media Corp, like you talked about, there were the people going, yes, we want to do this, the people going, no, bad, and then the people in between. How did you all, I guess people are still somewhat in those containers. Mm-hmm. What have you done to kind of change people's minds or get people on board? What does that look like with an organization kind of being yes, this is not as scary and bad as you think it is?
There's lots of conversations that are happening with those editors and sort of our senior staff on the digital side and corporate side who are in favor of it, trying to not force anybody into using it, but explaining that it's not going away and that it's something that we're using in different areas of the company, and we're not doing the things that you're afraid of. Even that Chat PMC sidebar, one brand did not want anything to do with it, so we wrote additional permissions so that they don't have access to it at all on their site. And 3 months later, they came back and they agreed that, okay, we'll let certain editors in just to see what it's like.
Were your first convertees your developers, your content creators? Who were the first people to be oh, okay, yeah, I'm on board? What was the first group to really just, I guess, the group that's minds were easily changed and being yes, I'm hopping on board this train? What was that constituency looking like?
A lot of those folks, well, from where I sit, it was project, and engineers were super into it. From our VP talking to other departments, it turns out that everybody was into it. Like there were a lot of sales folks, a lot of planners that were trying to see what it could do, how it could improve, their pitches, their emails.
Cool. All right, thanks.
Yeah. Sure.
So what was the biggest obstacle in building this project? And if you can say, what was your role there? And what did you find the hardest point for yourself?
The biggest obstacle, I think, was just not knowing what it is we wanted to create, what we needed to create. And there was a lot of just kind of running off after something shiny over there and something shiny over there, and trying to figure out what a practical use was. So I was involved with, personally was involved with a lot of these evaluations, just throwing something up on a test site and playing around with it, seeing what it could do. And that included identifying some like coding tools that we do use as engineers as well. Frankly, incorporating some of this stuff into our site, the hardest part is for me is figuring out the Gutenberg stuff, because I don't know it. But working with API, a lot of it's working with APIs, which is fairly straightforward.
Hello. Hey, Dan. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. So we've been doing similar stuff with, we built our own stuff before, prior to ChatGPT, and everything you started off seems like exactly what we did at our company. So wonderful to see another, you don't know what other companies are doing, so it's good to get that insight and see that as well. The question I had was that right now, we create content in, I think, a similar scale, maybe some have slightly lesser, but from our experience, AI content hasn't done too well, so we use AI for other tasks. So one of the things, our writers and editors, when they provide a piece of content, and the writers and the editor looks at it, we actually check if it's AI detectable, and if it is, we send it back, like, you need to rewrite this. And so our focus is to make sure that content isn't written by AI, but it seemed like you started that way, but towards the end, towards the middle, you're now using AI. So what's your experience with search engine? We do fantastic with search engine ranking. So, but with AI content, pages start dropping off. Right. So we stay away from that as much as possible. So what's your experience on that?
Well, we're not using AI to generate content. It's not creating posts, it's not creating images, so we don't have to worry about that. Obviously, I know other editors at other places where they've had those conversations with people who are trying to get away with something and are using AI to help write. So we've also done some testing on some of the various AI detection services. So we haven't quite figured out what to do with that yet, but a lot of the editors are pretty, they're aware of what folks are writing, so they sort of handle those suspicions, I think, on their own, without it sort of becoming a bigger company issue. Yeah.
So you had a question mark like that, trying to figure out where.
Well, with that particular service, right, which is intended just to create headlines and titles and do some of the blurbs and stuff that'll go out on social media services.
Good morning. My name is Robert Allen, co-host of the Between Over and X podcast. There's a couple of things at play here. From the corporate perspective, right, which you play in, AI you know, the elephant in the room is it's going to replace us and we're going to lose our jobs. So I think some of the things at play are that employees may not be willing to admit just how useful AI is and what they do, for fear that they may put themselves out of a job. As an entrepreneur who makes all the decisions, who's not worried about losing their job, AI has changed everything for us. We launched our first podcast in 2005. There was no such thing as AI. It was real intelligence. So summaries, transcripts, articles, pull quotes was something that we did manually. It took hours and hours and hours. Now that has changed everything for us. So Holly and I run the whole business ourselves using AI, and we don't want to give it up, right? It's helped us. So the challenge becomes what you touched on and making it known to everyone. So I don't know if anyone realizes, but like YouTube right now has added a tick box that you have to say, was this created in any way with AI? So how honest are people going to be to say, hey, gee, you know what, we used AI to generate our transcript and all. So where does that line come in? You know, as to, did you use AI to create the content or to make the content better or to, you know, make the workflow better? So there's so many issues at play here that, you know, being on the bleeding edge, and we're all really here on the bleeding edge of this, right? AI is on everyone's lips, but if you ask the average person, what does it mean? You know, they might refer to the Terminator.
Right.
So, you know, from the corporate perspective, what's being done to handle the whole philosophy of AI rather than what it does? It's what can it do? How can it actually help us? So I don't know if there's an answer to that, but you know, I think all of this just creates more and more questions. And you know, I'm glad I'm here at the beginning of it because I'd rather learn from the mistakes than have to catch up, because this is moving at lightning speed. So just your thoughts on any.
I mean, the adage is there's technology is neither good nor evil. It's just how you use it. I mean, I think that plays a large part in this right now. You can use it to make those transcripts, identify those pull quotes way faster, get more stuff out, or have more time to go for a walk or something, you know, depending on what your values are. There's also plenty of disinformation of the deep fakes and stuff like that, and that's a nefarious use that's, you know, right now can be fairly easy to detect, but it's only going to get harder and harder. You know, I don't know. It's going to come down to how people use it, and you know, I don't know what sort of legislation will come down the pipe about that, but you know, I think there's a lot of people on both sides that are trying to figure out what it can do and what we need it to not do, and how to protect us against it.
If I can, I'm here because I started a WordPress site about probably 8-9 months ago to help small businesses, and this group's been helpful with that, very helpful. And I still need a lot of help, quite frankly, and with some YouTube videos that we've gotten up on that, and that's grown pretty well. But at that time, judges were putting up warnings that if you were using AI, you had to inform them of the fact that AI was being used for assistance. Since that time, the ABI has now issued a rule that indicates lawyers have to stay abreast of developing technologies, and there's statements being issued in every state that if you are not up to speed and aren't using developing technologies, it will be malpractice. So we've gone full circle where not using these technologies seems like it's going to be, for lawyers, malpractice. So that shows you how fast this has turned, probably in 6 months. So this is sort of where the world's going. And I think that what you're talking about is exactly where we're going. So it's evolving so quickly in the world where law, which is probably the slowest moving profession in the world, is coming around to this too.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show where we are. I'd like to know exactly how you managed to get the closed circuit AI into your system and exactly what the cost was of that in total, because that was the most fascinating thing you talked about to me.
I don't know what the exact price was, but it was, I think as far as the time from when we identified it to when we had something going, it was, a few weeks.
Really?
Yeah, everything is pretty, the services that provide, the Microsoft that we use, OpenAI, and other providers, I think they have, especially Microsoft, has it down to a pretty easy, click a few things and you've got your environment set up. And that, the cost comes in when you're training and trying to add your own content and improve your version of it. And that takes time and some money. But we did, I was talking about these embeddings that we're looking at doing. To do that for 10 years worth of content or so was looking at like, less than $500, to run all that stuff for a month. So, yeah, I was surprised.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. So I've been involved in AI for many, many years, through several iterations. One of the things that doesn't seem to be taken account of now, I'm just interested in your opinion on this, is the cost structure. Because right now, it's all being discounted. So you're using Microsoft services. They're giving huge discounts, just like they did on SaaS services 10 years ago, to encourage people to come on board. And then they're going to lock them in. Do you have any concerns about when that discounting goes away from Microsoft or OpenAI and so on, that the cost is just going to ramp up, and suddenly what looked good doesn't look so good?
Right.
It's happened with AWS as well. Whenever you scale up, the costs start to go out of control unless you know what you're doing. So do you have any concerns, any sort of measures and so on to take account of that?
Me, no, but we have folks that do that. That's kind of a glib answer, but I'm sure, once you're locked into a system, it becomes harder to get out, and right, they can take advantage of that and raise the prices. The compute, the compute power and stuff like that requires to build these things is going to get passed on at some point.
Right, yeah, exactly. And at the moment, they're taking heavy losses, billions and billions of dollars of heavy losses too. So
Right.
and as usage goes up, that's only going to make this worse. So.
Yeah. I don't really have any thoughts on that.
The other thing, just coming back to what people were talking about, labeling content, I believe there's a number of bills going through at the moment. California and I think New York are trying to introduce bills to make it mandatory to label any content that was generated using AI, which also begs the question, was it all generated by AI, or was AI assisting in the generation? Do you still have to label it?
Right.
But that seems to be one of the things happening.
Right. In the Pulitzers this past year, they as part of the application, they did have, they wanted people to let them know if they used any AI as part of their preparation of the entries. And it turned out there were a bunch of nominees and winners that did use some sort of AI. But it was training models to look through legal documents, police reports, for phrases that that they were able to use, and they did disclose that. Doing a lot of stuff with imaging and map, identifying. I think it was bomb craters in satellite images, things that would take years for humans to do. They were able to use that technology as part of it, and they did disclose that as part of the entry and to the reader as part of the just the information about the story. But 10 years ago, you didn't have to disclose that you did the calculations using Excel or R or Python, but, you know, that, but now.
But now everyone knows about
Yeah.
AI, people care about it, and all these things are.
Yeah.
Then people didn't care, so you could get away with things now
Right.
becoming so public that it's just not going to be as easy to get away with that,
Right.
that kind of thing. And the whole, I don't know whether you have any notion of an AI governance organization to sort of keep on top of these things and so on, just so that, you know, across the organization, people are doing the right things, they're staying within regulatory requirements as those evolve.
Yeah, we do have an AI committee that does meet with some, I don't know how often they meet, but they stay on top of this and stay on top of the uses within the company and option, you know, sort of what could be coming down in the future, and figuring out how that will force us to evolve and our policies to evolve.
Okay, thank you.
Everybody, thank you for your questions. Let's give a round of applause for Dan Berko.
Thank you.